Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome to the celebration of the Africa Prize for Leadership for the Sustainable End of Hunger. The African woman is the invisible producer in Africa. For thousands of years, African women have met the basic survival needs of the continent. It is she who grows, processes, transports, and markets virtually all of Africa's food. It is she who spends hours fetching the fuel and the water. It is she who raises the children and manages the household. And it is the African woman who creates and runs the majority of small businesses. There is no other region of the world where women meet so many of the basic needs. It is said that if African women were to stop working for one day, on that day, there would be no food, no caring for the sick, no caring for the children, no sewing, no trading in the market. Life would stop, literally stop. If we were to look at sub-Saharan Africa today, this is what we'd find. We find 45 countries with a population of 711 million people, more than twice the population of the United States, but sub-Saharan Africa has 3 times the landmass of the United States. The vast majority of the people live in the rural area, and they are working in agriculture. The gross national income for all of sub-Saharan Africa is $319 billion. That's 1/3 of the total net worth of the 400 richest citizens of the United States. Nearly half the population lives on $1 a day or less. The literacy rate is 62%, life expectancy 46 years, the infant mortality rate is 105. And almost 1/3 of the population suffers from chronic hunger. And if that weren't challenging enough, there are over 29 million people living with HIV/AIDS. Over 12 million have died, more than 2 million in a single year. This pandemic has created 11 million orphans. The 1990s were a particularly difficult decade. During this decade, the per capita income declined, poverty increased. This desperate and declining situation in Africa is due to many factors: debt, unfair trade, agriculture subsidies, poor governance, disease, regional conflicts, local conflicts, and violence. Inexplicably, foreign aid decreased by 25% in the last decade. A big part of the problem, which is almost never acknowledged, is that Africa is trying to confront these horrendous challenges with only 1/2 of its population, while suppressing the other half. And that is the issue we are here to discuss tonight: women, their leadership, and the future of Africa. The conditions in Africa are bad for everyone, but as is the case with most countries, they are much worse for women. Sub-Saharan Africa has the highest levels of maternal deaths in the world. 2 million girls undergo female genital mutilation across Africa annually, 2 million. And of the people infected with HIV/AIDS, 58% are women. It's the only region in the world where more women are infected than men. The truth is, there's a direct correlation between women's low status, the violation of their human rights, and HIV transmission. Caring for the sick and caring for the ever-increasing number of people who are infected with HIV/AIDS falls almost exclusively on women. Since shouldering this devastation, African women report endemic levels of exhaustion, grief, and depression. Even for the strong women of Africa, this burden is becoming too much to bear. In sub-Saharan Africa, and this is equally true of other regions with the persistence of hunger, women bear full responsibility for the key issues in ending hunger: family health, nutrition, sanitation, education, and increasingly, family income. Yet, women are denied and systematically denied the information, the education, and the freedom of action they need to fulfill these responsibilities. For example, women produce 80% of the food, but they receive 7% of the agricultural extension services. Studies show that if women farmers were given the same support as that given to men, their yields could increase by as much as 20%. Women are at the center of the development process, and when they are empowered, there is increased agricultural production, faster economic growth, less corruption in governance, and the overall health and well-being of a society is greatly improved. But for 25 years, in declarations and development plans that have been created by the leaders of Africa, that truth has been ignored. The crucial role of women as food producers, as agents of change, and major contributors to the economy has rarely even been acknowledged. And never have plans been created or financial resources budgeted for women to be able to play their crucial role in development. Never. Let's look to the 1980s. In the 1980 Lagos Plan of Action, far-sighted African leaders called for the full integration of women into the development process. They warned, development that ignores women will fail, and it has. In the 1984 Harare Declaration, African ministers pledged to give highest priority to agriculture and rural development, yet there was no mention of women. In 1986, the UN Special Session on Africa's Economic and Social Crisis made agriculture the priority of priorities and highlighted the lack of attention to food crops. Yet the plan made little reference to women, and the budget made no concrete commitments to women farmers. The 1989 ECA Conference for Ministers did recognize the crucial role of women as producers and agents of change. But in the actual alternative framework, again, women were ignored. In 1989, 700 women from across Africa met in Abuja, Nigeria, to again say to Africa, women do and must play a central role in the development process. No one was listening. In 1990, the Arusha Conference in Tanzania again emphasized the need for women to take a leading role in development. Again, no action was taken. And it is profoundly disappointing that the newly formed African Union adopted a development plan in 2002 that, while stating gender equality as a principle, once again does not adequately include women in its framework or its plan of action. What have we learned from this history? Simply this: if women are going to be liberated, if women are going to be empowered to be successful in their crucial role in African development, then it will be up to women to exert their own leadership to make this happen. It's audacious and unfair to ask the African women who are already doing so much of the work, producing the food, raising the families, caring for the sick, to now step up to the plate and carve out leadership for themselves and other women of Africa. But until this happens, there is no future. What makes those of us in the Hunger Project believe that a new future in Africa is possible is our work on the ground with the people of Africa in 7 countries. When we see thousands of African women and men at the grassroots level in our vision, commitment, and action workshops gather together to create a vision for their villages and then see them take the actions to realize this vision, that's what makes us believe that a new future is possible. When we see the African woman food farmer increase her agricultural yield, be better able to feed her family, educate her children, and create new businesses with a minimum amount of training and credit, that's what makes us believe a new future is possible. In our epicenters affecting more than 2 million people, every village committee has an equal number of women and men in leadership positions. That's what makes us believe that a new future is possible. And when we realize that more than 100,000 women and men will have taken the Hunger Project's HIV/AIDS Gender Inequality Workshop and have taken it before the end of the year, that's what makes us believe that a new future is possible. When we see these women and men working together to address this issue of HIV/AIDS, learning together to stop the harmful gender attitudes and behaviors that drive the spread of this disease, that's what makes us believe a new future is possible. We believe it is incumbent on us, the organizations and the people who love Africa and are committed to its future, to do everything possible to call forth, acknowledge, and support women's leadership. This is why it is so important for the most prestigious prize ever created for Africa, the Africa Prize for Leadership for the Sustainable End of Hunger, be given to honor the emerging leadership of African women. I thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate and value greatly that the Hunger Project, a highly regarded organization, has seen some significance in my endeavors to help Ethiopian women and has awarded me its coveted prize. Considering the eminent status and vast contributions that other awardees of the Hunger Project have made to advance human welfare, I feel particularly humbled that my contribution in the struggle for the rights of women in my country has received the recognition that is bestowed upon me this evening. I am also happy and feel privileged that I share the Hunger Project's recognition with my African sister, Sarah Longwe, who has contributed much to the struggle against discrimination in Africa, and particularly in her country, Zambia. This joint recognition underscores the essential unity of the struggle for women's rights in Africa. Some observers might ask why the Hunger Project, which is dedicated to fighting for global elimination of hunger, would appreciate and recognize the struggle of women against traditional and legal discrimination. A readily available answer to this is to recall that promoting the rights of women is one of the Hunger Project's objectives. I would like to add, however, that tonight's recognition goes beyond a mere reference to this objective. I believe it underscores the often missed linkage between hunger and women's deprivation of rights. Hunger is often born out of extreme poverty or the collapse of food distribution system. And those who bear its brunt most are women and children. Where women are deprived of their potential contribution to increasing the supply of food, or when they are deprived equal role with men in other spheres of life, hunger is a frequent phenomenon, and its effects more devastating. No one has articulated better this linkage than Ms. Joan Holmes, the president of the Hunger Project, who in her recent testimony before the Congressional Women's Caucus and tonight again stated, in countries with the persistence of hunger, women bear full responsibility for key issues in ending hunger: family health, nutrition, sanitation, and increasingly family income. Yet, women are systematically denied the information, education, and freedom of action they need to fulfill these responsibilities. Now, before I close my remarks, I would like to take this opportunity, the opportunity of this occasion, to recognize my mother, Ashenafi Stegen. Who is in the audience? I owe all that I am today to my mother. Although of modest education, she instilled in me and my siblings the value of education, discipline, and hard work. I would also like to remember on this occasion my father of beloved memory, an indulgent father who always injected a measure of balance to the strict discipline in the family. I also want to introduce my brother, Gashaw Ashenafi, who is also in the audience. Who, in the interaction of sibling competition that had also an element of traditional male chauvinism, provided my first experience of asserting my rights and the space in the family. Straightening him out was my first victory in the struggle. Speaking about family, let me also acknowledge the support I received from my husband, Dr. Araya Asfaw, who could not be here tonight because he has to stay home to take care of our 2 daughters. I would like to sincerely thank the board, the president, and the staff of the Hunger Project for the award it has given me. An award which gives recognition to the cause of women's struggle for securing their rights, and also for recognizing the nexus between women's struggle for their rights and the elimination of hunger in Africa. I thank you very much.
Five and a half decades of living, I need extra lenses. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And I have to thank the Hunger Project for attempting to make the lives of Meaza and myself appear like a series of successful events. But to me, it never seemed like that. What I mostly experienced in my early days, this was becoming outraged at being discriminated against, and then trying to claim my right to equal treatment, only to run into a brick wall. Let me give an example. As a young secondary school teacher, I turned up for work one day wearing trousers and was immediately told by the headmistress to go home and change. I refused, of course. This instruction sorry, I mixed up my papers. This instruction was on the basis of some invisible rule, as I call it, because it was not written anywhere. The whole thing became a very big issue. The regional inspector of schools was called in to tell me I had to follow all instructions of my headmistress, irrespective of how unreasonable. The leader of the teachers' union, who was supposed to defend me, instead came only to give me the same lecture. At the end of a long saga, I received a letter from the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Education, no less, telling me to obey the instruction. I wrote back a letter explaining why I wouldn't and why I didn't think he had any right to give any such instruction. I continued wearing my trousers. In fact, I now made sure that I never wore a skirt. This simple story, although fairly trivial, has many of the elements of women's everyday struggles against discrimination. Suddenly, out of nowhere, I had run into that brick wall. A brick wall both invisible and visible. Visible in that it was definitely there. After all, I had run into it. But invisible in that it was not about women's rights. Well, certainly not in their arguments. This, they said, was all about decency, custom, and tradition. And most importantly, it was about the disciplinary question of whether I could do as I was told. And such invisible brick walls affect all development projects in Africa. Let me give you the example of a hunger project intervention in Africa. The African Women Food Farmers Initiative. This provides women farmers with increased access to resources, and especially in the form of skills training and credit. But traditionally, men control the money and the land. Existing credit organizations lend to men who hold the collateral. Husbands usually control the proceeds from the sale of cash crops. Therefore, such an initiative immediately raises the strategic question of whether the initiative aims at assisting women within their brick wall, or whether it must assist them to move the wall. Hopefully, they themselves will begin moving the wall and then demand assistance. Now, let me return to my trousers, which I shall never forget. You see, in my trouser fight, it was not merely Sarah Longwe that was insulted. It was all women. That is why I took up the fight. And so, tonight, as you give me this prize, you do not give it to me personally. You give it to all the women of Africa in their struggle for equal rights. The prize money is not mine. Sorry, Tawani, my daughter who is in the audience. It will be used as seed money to establish a new campaign for women's rights and in Africa. On behalf of my sisters in the struggle, of whom I'm just one of many, I thank you very, very much.